Want to learn how to get massive media exposure? That's a very good question. Let's see if we can answer that for you coming up right now on The Rise to the Top. And welcome, my friends. It is your great and good friend, David Siteman Garland, a.k.a. DSG. I want to welcome you here to The Rise to the Top, episode number 5 here of the brand new podcast, the brand new podcast, right? Because I podcasted, as you probably know from the first 3 episodes, so I podcasted from 2008 to 2013 in a very, very different way. And now we are back at it here in 2018. Where does the time go, my friends? So lots going on here today, and I'm very excited to be bringing in here a special guest, Selena Soo, in a few minutes. But just kind of give a little context what we're talking about. When we started the podcast, when I started the podcast, I don't know, the royal we, if you will. The first 3 episodes I did solo. I'm going to have a lot more solo episodes coming up too, kind of giving you some behind the scenes insights of my business, all kinds of other goodies, tips, advice, and things like that. And also, we're doing a wide variety of interviews as well. And the way that I see interviews going on The Rise to the Top is there's kind of 2 different types of interviews. Interview kind of number 1, if you will, is more the biographical interview, which I love doing those. So for example, having someone come on, tell their story, right? How they became successful, how they grew their business, what were the mistakes, what were the failures, what were the key decision points, all that kind of juicy, jazz that we get into at the business. So that's one type of interview. And the other type of interview, which I also love, which is like the one that we're doing here today, is something that is advice-based. So bringing on an expert that can teach you something that you can then apply for your business. And that's exactly what we're doing here today. And also that was what was going on last week with the one and only Nick Stevenson when we talked about ebooks and using ebooks to explode your business. You can check that out at therisetop.com/episode 4. If you have not checked that out, that's just the number 4, therisetop.com/episode 4. And today we are on episode 5. And as always, you can see the show notes at therisetop.com/episode 5. So let me give you a little context about Selena. Is that Selena and I have been circling each other for years. She's actually a customer of mine. We've connected online. We've never actually met in person, which is so crazy, right? I mean, we've connected all over the place, but not really in person. Her name keeps coming up over and over and over again. And I keep hearing from her. I keep hearing people mentioning her. I keep hearing all these great things. So I dug in and I did some research on this, and I realized that Selena is an absolute well-known rock star at getting and teaching people how to get publicity. Okay, because publicity is one of those things we kind of throw out there. What's publicity? Is it blogs? Is it podcasts? Is it magazines? Is it being on Oprah? By the way, she's gotten some customers on Oprah, which is a whole nother story. But what is PR and how can it specifically help your business, right? So if you're a personal brand expert coach, course creator, thing like that, you might not be thinking that PR is the move for you. Maybe there's other ways that you're getting traffic and notoriety and exposure, but PR is fantastic as a business builder for numerous reasons, which we'll get into even more with Selena, but I can share a few. One is social proof, right? So people love seeing your name out there, right? So whether it's traditional media or new media, it's incredible social proof. You get those fun little logos you can put on your sites and your landing pages and things like that. It's absolutely great social proof when other people are talking about you, interviewing you, featuring you. But it's also a tremendous business builder from a email list perspective. Okay. And we will share with that in this interview. It's really like a mini training here today, is that it is also a traffic builder, but you don't want to waste your traffic. And I'll talk about this in the upcoming interview with Selena. When I first started getting PR and got featured in a lot of things, this was way back in the day, I had no idea about how to leverage that, right? Like, how do you actually use publicity that you can get? It's one thing to get the publicity, but how do you actually use it to build your business, either generate leads, add more subscribers, etc.? So we're going to be breaking that down in this interview today, really from start to finish. She's got a 7-step process for this, and we're going to deep dive and talk about why you should be getting publicity, how you should be getting publicity, and also how to leverage it. So we'll talk about pitching, we'll talk about where to pitch, we'll talk about how to pitch, we'll talk about all the little nuances and all that goodness coming up right now. So That is the precursor for today's podcast with Selena Soo. So without further ado, let's get at it. All right. Well, I am joined now by Selena. Hello, Selena. How are you?
Hey, David. So happy to be here.
I am pumped to have you. Now, first of all, you got to tell us, where are you coming at us from here today on the podcast?
Yeah, I'm in New York City.
Okay, beautiful New York City. So we're going New York City to St. Louis to the world. That's how we're doing it here today. So, let's just get right at it. We have a lot of things we're going to cover here today. We're going to be giving some great tips on publicity and PR and all that kind of stuff for everyone. But I kind of want to take a step back. And in the intro, I talked a little bit about kind of your background, kind of gave a little bit of the bio. But I was curious, what got you really excited and kind of pumped up? Where did your passion for teaching this and doing this come from when it comes to media and publicity?
Yeah, absolutely. So this started in my late 20s when I had a quarter life crisis. I was working at a women's nonprofit making $42,000 a year. And I was just really unhappy in, multiple areas of my life. And I was feeling depressed, and all I knew was I needed to feel better. I didn't know how. And so someone introduced me to this life coach, and I joined her women's life coaching group. And we would, read different books every week. And I got exposed to people like Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Louise Hay, and then eventually this world of online entrepreneurship, Marie Forleo, Ramit Sethi. I learned about you, David. And I remember just being, so inspired by these people because one thing that I realized is that when people are feeling lost or unhappy, they don't just need more information. They're actually looking for inspiration. And I thought it was so exciting to see these role models out there that embodied this message of possibility, whether it was like, you can find your passion, you can start your business, you can leave that toxic relationship, you can heal your health. And so I just felt like, I want the whole world to know about these people. That kind of became the way that I felt like I could make my biggest difference. And so I was that weird person who would get a newsletter from Ramit and be like, oh my gosh, this story is amazing, and forward it to 35 people, many who wouldn't respond to me, but just oh my gosh, this is so great. And so I just fell in love with this world. And, eventually I started my own business around it. I went to business school, and, I wasn't interested in going, the finance or consulting route. And so I had a lot of free time on my hands. I did a summer internship and started working with this really awesome female entrepreneur who had a media company. And that's how I started to think of myself differently, because I always thought, okay, well, I'm this, underpaid nonprofit employee who works really hard, but, don't really know, what's possible for me. And then I was like, wow, I have these entrepreneurial qualities. And I eventually started connecting with some of the people that I admired. I was on their list. I responded to their emails. I showed up at their meetups. I found ways to offer value. I made introductions, and that's, how I got started.
I love it. And so just to kind of also, so it's funny, we were actually talking before we even did this podcast today. It's funny because I feel like we've been running in parallel circles all the time, because before we even started recording this, I asked Selena, I said, okay, now we got to go back and figure out, how do we actually know each other? Right. And this is one of the funny things about the virtual world, because you were in my Create Awesome Interviews class back in the day. We've kind of been on email back and forth. We've kind of rolled in the same circles. It's like we've been circling each other like two sharks. And now we've come together now today for the podcast, which is what I absolutely love. So for your business, Selena, you found this passion, you discovered this interesting world of helping people get exposure and things like that we're going to get into today. In terms of your business and what you do, I know you've got a course, that's a big core of it. We're going to talk about that later on. But just out of curiosity, when you were kind of building up your expertise in this, did you work with one-on-one clients? How did you kind of develop your business to kind of become this expert in publicity and PR and media?
Yeah. So I would say the skill that I have around, connecting people and helping them get publicity is something that I've just naturally been good at. When I'm so excited about people, I want everyone else to be excited about them. And so I think it's I just spend a lot of time thinking about, what do I need to say to get someone's attention? And I always assume that the person on the receiving end is extremely busy. They're stressed out. They have no time. Their default answer to everything is no. So I need to present something in a way that is so attractive that they would want to say yes. So that's kind of how I approach things. But in terms of actually building my business, it began with taking online courses. I don't know what I would have done without them. I was in business school, and you would think that, spending 100 grand in business school, you would be equipped to start a business, but not really. I was the only person that started my own business from business school. I mean, some people joined startups that were, venture backed, but I was the only person doing this kind of thing. And I had actually taken a course from Ramit Sethi called Earn 1K. So that's how I got started. And I got my first one-on-one client. And I got another one after that. One of them ended up being this huge nightmare. And I started to get confused because
classic.
Yeah, it happens to us all. But for me, because before I had my business, I was just always, and I still do it, I just make connections because it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's synergistic. But, I was doing it from a place of generosity and, this is a win-win. And I had one person who, was the kind of person oh, Marie Forleo, go get her Oprah contact for me. Or, oh, you are connected to Tim Ferriss. And just things that I may be, I know some of these people or be acquainted to them, but it's not really appropriate. And so I was being pushed and pressured to do all these things where I was like, oh my gosh, this is not how I operate. And I found a business coach, and she, suggested to me, why don't you start doing more of the strategy work and coaching and, group programs and things like that. So, I transitioned from doing done for you to doing coaching. And then I turned that into a mastermind because I wanted to create these retreats where I could bring my clients to meet my media contacts in person.
Ooh,
and then from there,
that
online program. Yeah. So it was one step at a time. It really evolved. And now, occasionally I'll do some done for you work for people who I just feel I have to help them and I'm the perfect person. But now I have choices, which is always a good thing.
I love it, because really at the end of the day, what you're doing here, and that's what we're going to talk about on this podcast and also just your entire business, you're empowering other people to be able to do this themselves for their business, right? And that's really what it is. I mean, you started, which most people do, is you started by actually doing it for them. But then a lot of people, hey, there's lots of, you're only one person. How many people could you possibly be pitching everyone to? And so you were able now to teach, thousands of other people to do this now for themselves and for your business. And I could tell you, as most of our listeners on the podcast here are personal brands or aspiring personal brands, and this media is very daunting and confusing to people. And it's funny because I look back when I got started. So when I got started back in business in 2008, I was always pitching myself. I had no idea what I was doing. Not a clue. No idea what I was going to do with the traffic. No idea what I was going to do with the exposure other than put a little logo up on my website. I was very confused back in the day when I was getting started with this. And now things have changed a lot. And I think a great place to start is talking about what you call the publicity pyramid. And what I'm fascinated about this, and let's go through this here, is because I think where people get confused, and I always get confused on this too, is the power and the reason you should focus on new media and the power and the reason why you should also focus on old media. Because I remember someone that you brought up who's a mutual friend of ours and someone that I've had on my old podcast twice, Mr. Tim Ferriss. He talks about that when he first came out with the 4-Hour Work Week, right? Well, that first book was a great book, changed many people's lives. He focused entirely on podcasts and blogs, and that's what helped him move the needle. So the world is changing. So let's start kind of helping people navigate through this.
Yeah, no, I love it because people will come to me and say things like, Selena, I want to be on the Today Show, or I want to be interviewed by Oprah on Super Soul Sunday. And it's funny because sometimes they don't even watch the Today Show and they're like, that's where I want to be. And the thing is, that can certainly be on your wish list, or it could be part of your media journey, but that's, rarely, our first stop. And it doesn't even make sense to start there. So, imagine, a triangle, which is a pyramid, and there's 5 different levels. So at the base of the pyramid, that is called your home base. So your home base is your online presence. So, no matter what kind of media you're pitching, if you're approaching them and saying, I'm an expert in XYZ, I'm a personal brand, and they Google you and you've got nothing online, no website, then it's going to be hard for them to see you as an expert. They're going to have a question mark there. So that's step 1. And the good thing is that a lot of us have a website. If we don't, just whip up something simple, but you want to have some kind of online
Side note on that. huge interruption, but a huge point here is that if you do not have a website right now and you want to create the perfect expert website, Selena, I've got a software for this. I've got the solutions coming up. You didn't even know about this. I'm full of surprises. I am full of surprises. That's why I interrupt. So if you do not, just a fun fact, better than whipping something up like, grandma's homemade cookies here. We don't know if they're going to be good or not. Go to conversioncats.com, conversioncats.com. Grab a 14-day free trial. That's what my site, therisetop.com is built on. We have literally thousands of people built like this as well, because I can tell you without a doubt that impression matters to people. That's just one big thing when it comes to media. Anyway, that's my little antidote.
Yeah, well, so that's step number one. So it's easy to get started. Go to conversioncats.com. And then from there, once you have some kind of web presence, perhaps you even have a blog, and then the next level 2 is guest posts. And what I love about guest posts is that there's so many websites out there that are dedicated to guest posts, whether it is Business Insider, Forbes, Huffington Post, Mind Body Green, Thrive Global. And these are brand name websites. So, when you are featured on these sites, like people know what they are. And also, when they link back to your site, it's really great for SEO. It's good for traffic. I've had some of my biggest list building opportunities from, guest post sites. And sometimes they can be more niche industry sites. Like when I was on my mentor Ramit Sethi's website and did a guest post, like I got 2,000 subscribers from that. So, guest posts can be really powerful. And then the next level is podcast. That's level 3. So after you've written about your ideas in an in-depth way, now you can think about, having a conversation, in-depth back and forth. But it's really great to have written out your ideas, your philosophy, your story first before you, go on a podcast and have that conversation. So those are more, I would say, new media, right? And with some of these podcasts, like they may have like go really deep with their listeners, and they might not be household names per se, but podcasts are actually the best for a lot of us online entrepreneurs, people that sell services, online courses, premium coaching, because someone that is devoting 30 minutes to an hour to learn and improve themselves, is someone who is likely to purchase a course, to hire a coach. So I know for myself, like that is the best kind of publicity that I could get. And you can, target very, niche audiences. So that's level 3. And then level 4 is magazines. So now we're moving into the mainstream. And with magazines, they typically publish 10 to 12 times a year. So there is, less space to be in a print magazine. But when you're in a magazine, it really raises your credibility. And if you were looking to get a book deal one day and you can show that you've been featured in mainstream media, that's a really powerful thing. And it's also cool, when you're going to an airport or, on a plane or at the dentist's office, flipping through and seeing yourself mentioned in a magazine, and you're literally reaching millions of people. It is more mass, it's less concentrated, but it is very powerful. And then the highest level on the publicity pyramid would be TV, because when you're on TV, you really have to be ready for it. With a podcast interview, you may be having an hour-long conversation, and we have conversations every day. But for TV, you may have just like a 3-minute segment. So thinking about how do I go from, an hour to 3 minutes?
A soundbite, right? We call that a soundbite versus a long-form crazy interview like this one.
Exactly. Like you might just have a couple of sound bites and that's it. And the other thing with TV is it's not enough to just be an expert, but you have to be good on video. One of my friends who's a TV producer said, you're pitching yourself for TV without being able to share any video is kind of like selling a house without any photos. What's the point? So it can take time to work your way up to that opportunity. But imagine if someone on the Today Show was like, oh, hey, I heard that you're the ultimate expert at small business or digestive health. And, they start doing some research. There's no online presence. They're curious if you've done any articles or interviews. There's nothing there. Then it's going to be harder to be considered for those top opportunities. So that's why I have this, pyramid concept, because every level builds upon the next one and prepares you for the opportunities at the top of the pyramid.
Okay. I love it. And I think, I'd love to dissect and kind of go through this as well. And I think that's going to be possibly the best way to do this, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can go a lot of different ways here, but I love that you've got this 7 steps, which you call 7 steps to massive media exposure. And what I like to do on the podcast is, of course, crazily deep dive into this stuff and really give people a great look at this. So, I want to start let's go through these 7 steps. 'Cause I think it's going to be helpful, but I want to ask you a question first. As we had started, this might even be step number 1, so I don't even want to spoiler alert it for anyone. But something when people ask me about publicity or anything like that, or things I've done in the past, and I'm by no means a publicity expert or anything like that, but something that I tell them is that a mistake that I think I made early on, and this was when I was out there just crazily pitching myself, no idea what I was doing, was that I didn't have a very strong call to action with many of my original interviews that I did. So for example, what I would do is I would just say, hey, check out more about me on therisetotop.com, or hey, you can, even worse, you can connect with me on Twitter or something like that, right? And what I've always told people, and tell me if this is off base, I'm crazy, I'm right, whatever, I'm wrong, is that I always tell people that especially when dealing with new media, podcasts, blogs, guest posting, things like that if you're an expert and you're an expert business, and that's what we're talking about here, that you need to have something, a call to action for people to sign up for something to then join your email list. Whether it's, a cool PDF, if it's an ebook, it's a free video, it's a funny picture of your cat, whatever it might be. Am I on base, off base, a little on base?
No,
with
that's
that?
like 100% right. Like with your media, you want to be strategic, you want to leverage that. So that's definitely a part of it, is bringing people back to your website.
Okay, cool. All right, good. I just want to make sure that I wasn't giving people horrendous advice. And from now on, I'll just pass them on to you. I'll say, all right, here's Selena. She'll tell you better stuff. Okay, so let's break into this now, the 7 steps to massive media exposure, because I know everyone's sitting there right now and saying, well, how am I going to possibly do this? Where am I going to find the time? Where do I start? How do I know what to pitch? How do I know where to pitch? All these questions. So let's break it down into a step-by-step process. What's step number 1?
Yeah. So step number 1 is to define your big dreams. So, the media that you get should be connected to your big dreams and business goals. So is your big dream to write a best-selling book? Is it to have, location freedom? Is it to sell a best-selling, group program? Like whatever it is, get clear on what your business goals are so that you're kind of targeting that right kind of publicity. And connected to your big dreams are like, well, who do you want to serve? Are you looking to serve like a handful of high-end premium clients a year, or are you looking to serve the masses? So really getting clear on, what your big dreams are and where you want to go. So that's step number 1. Then step number 2 is to develop your media list, and your media list should, be connected to your big dreams. So we talked about the publicity pyramid. Like I said, with podcasts, like you're going to reach a really niche audience, and that's perfect if you're selling high-end programs, courses, coaching, and things like that. But if you were featured in a magazine and maybe you're one of multiple experts, and you've got like a little sound bite, like, no one's like, people are going to be impressed, but they're not going to like fall in love with you and be like, oh my gosh, this person is the coach for me. They may see that in a guest post where you share your personal story and your philosophy, or a podcast interview. Both of these are new media and long form media, but with the mainstream media, like it's not going to be the same, right? That's better if you're looking to sell a book and looking to reach the masses, or have a product that is a smaller price point.
That makes perfect sense. Now, question there is, when you're trying to develop a media list or start looking at people, this always confuses the heck out of people, because you don't want to be the crazy spammer. And some people are concerned, it's my business and I'm the person that's going to be the expert, right? In this case, does it sound bad if it's coming from me? Does that sound like I'm amateur hour? Does that matter?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. No, I mean, ideally it can come from you. I think it's definitely okay to hire a publicist, and, for some people that makes sense. It does. I would say it also depends on the kind of media. So for example, with a podcast, and I know that you'll be able to speak to this, the people that run podcasts, they're entrepreneurs, they've built their own audience. They've spent a lot of money cultivating and caring for their audience. It's different from like you pitching a magazine where it could be a revolving door of editors and they're not, the owners of the business.
Oh, that's a good point. I never thought about that.
So then I found with podcast hosts, like if they're going to be bringing someone on their podcast, they want to know that they've got good rapport with them, that it's a cool person, that they really believe in what they're doing. And, ideally that this person, is someone that has got some buzz around them, that they would attract new people to the podcast. Like these are things that podcasters just think about, whereas some other kind of media might not, consider it as strongly. And so, I found that when people like delegate the podcast pitches to like their virtual assistant, usually the podcast host is like a bit offended, or they just don't feel like they really know the person, and it's not like giving them any extra points, rather it's hurting them. And what I would suggest in that case is to have someone maybe help you draft the emails or prepare them, but you would be the one that sends them. And, of course, when it comes time to scheduling, you could have your assistant help you with that. But when you're doing that initial outreach for a podcast host or for an entrepreneur who owns like a popular blog, I would say it's best to come from you.
Okay, that's a great point. Now, also this list, right? Because I've heard this from students of mine in my Create Awesome Online Courses class when we start talking about publicity or other things like that as well, is that people start to get very kind of overwhelmed. If they want to, let's say they want to target and start looking at guest blogging and podcasts and kind of that little second rung there on that pyramid, what's the best way to go about that? I mean, do you just start Googling? Like how do you know where to find these people that would have guests or guest posts?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. Well, one is I actually have a list of 100 top media outlets, so people can check that out later. We'll let them know where they can go to get that. But yeah, I mean, there's a few ways to do it. One is, so get clear on what are the topics you want to talk about. What is the space you're in? So maybe it's the health space or it's small business or, women's issues or whatever it is. Like there are people who have compiled lists, so you could say like, top blogs for women entrepreneurs. And there will be a list of like the top 100 blogs that every woman entrepreneur should check out, or the top 10 podcasts, for health coaches or whatever it is. So Google is a powerful tool. So, there are already, pre-written lists that someone has spent, hours and hours doing that kind of research. So that's one way. Another technique is what I call the follow the leader technique. So let's say you are a life coach and you are looking to get in the media. One person that you might want to follow is Gabrielle Bernstein, who, is a spiritual expert, and she also talks about life coaching and how to live your best life and all of that. So you could Google the words Gabrielle Bernstein and interview, and then you would see like interviews that come up, like we've interviewed Gabrielle Bernstein or Gabrielle Bernstein, guest blog. You could also go to her website and see if she's got a media page. So this follow the leader technique is about you not reinventing the wheel, but making a list of maybe 5 top experts in your field and just searching on their websites online. You could go into iTunes and type their name in the podcast section, and all the podcasts that they've been featured on iTunes will pop up. And make a list of all those media outlets. If those media outlets have been good enough for the top people in your industry, then there's a chance that, a handful of them will be perfect for you.
I love it. And something that actually popped into my head too, I was talking about this with someone the other day. I want to see if you agree with this as well. When you're kind of thinking about who should I pitch and all that kind of good stuff, is that sometimes it's like a half step to the left or right of what your topic is. So for example, let's just say your topic was training new moms how to do fitness while they're super busy and just had a baby. I don't know, making it up. I'm just thinking of my wife, something she said she'd be obsessed with, okay? And instead of saying, okay, I'm going to do guest blogs and try to get into podcasts on, say, fitness websites, another way to be looking at that is say, okay, what about new mom websites, or what about mommy blogs or mom websites or pregnancy websites where you could then bring a fitness perspective into it. So I think a lot of times that to me seems like a strategy as well. Is that something that people should think about?
Yeah, that's perfect. And so that's really thinking about what are your expert topics. Maybe there is this one story idea that you love that is very specific, but it's important to think more broadly. So one example I love to share is I had a client who wrote a book on how she overcame breast cancer, and it was an incredible, inspiring book. But I said to her, we need to think more broadly, because if we're just pitching a breast cancer story, that's going to be relevant one time a year in October during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But the rest of the year, it's not as relevant. I spoke to my friends at different women's magazines, and they were saying, the average reader doesn't have breast cancer, or at least not right now. And we kind of, talk more about like prevention. So, we need to make it broader, right? So we thought about, okay, well, what are some other topics? Like things that she was really passionate about was like becoming the CEO of your own health, self-care, green living, overcoming challenges and obstacles in life. When she had breast cancer, she decided to make it the happiest time of her life and deepen her relationship with her husband and her kids. And so we came up with like a long list of topics. And through those topics, we were able to develop like specific story ideas around them. And so then she had like unlimited story ideas to pitch year round. But if she was just fixated on that one specific thing, then she would have been limited in the media coverage she got.
I love it. I love it. And that was by the way, my random tangents going down of questions I know people would want answered for sure. So just to recap here, step one was, let's recap steps 1 and 2 real fast.
Yeah. So step one is define your big dreams. So this is like, who are the people that you're looking to serve? What are your aspirations for your life? What are your business goals? Get clear on what that is. And once you know that, you'll be able to figure out step number 2, which is your media list, and the right media outlets that will help you achieve your big dreams.
Awesome. So let's go step number 3.
Yeah. So step number 3 is to develop your story ideas. So, a lot of people make the mistake of pitching topics versus a story idea. So like, pitching someone saying, well, hey, I would love for you to feature me. I'm an expert on women in business. That's like a general topic, but that's not like a specific story idea. And when you're thinking about story ideas, you really want to write them in headline format so that when you're pitching it, the person is like, oh, I can see like how that would appear on my website. I can see that being really clickable. So, with the best story ideas, number one, like you want them to be valuable in some way. It can't just be like, I've got a product, because that would be an advertisement, but rather like, for example, I had a client that had these, paper journals. And so instead of just pitching like, write about my journal, it was like, topics like, or story ideas like how a full calendar can actually reduce your overwhelm, or, 5 ways to be more productive, or how to create a morning and evening routine. So these were more service driven versus just about the product or the thing that the entrepreneur was looking to sell.
Got it. So for example, let's say I'm a dog trainer and instead of going to media outlets of any kind, new or old media, and saying, hey, I'm a dog trainer, I can be available, I can write anything, or I could be interviewed about any topic, I would go to them and say, you know what? I could teach you the 4 ways to teach a dog to do a backflip. Probably not recommended, or I could teach you the 3 or I could share the 3 new leashes that are coming out that are game changing for training your dog. Something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is to think about how can you make your idea a little bit different, a little bit counterintuitive. So one example is a yoga instructor that I know pitched an idea that was like, these 7 yoga moves can save your marriage. And, media loved it. They were like, what? A yoga move can save my marriage? It was all about like opening up your heart chakra. So it doesn't have to, with media, it doesn't have to be perfectly literal, but it needs to be interesting and catchy. So that's definitely something to think about.
Okay, got it. So what's step 4?
Yeah. So step number 4 is then to pitch. And, when you pitch, you want to think about, well, what's the best way to do it? Typically, email is the best way. I think Twitter is fine for, getting contact information or developing a relationship, but you really want to send it over email. And with your pitch, there's a few key components. So one is, you want to have a great subject line, because when someone, a busy editor, producer is going through their email, if the subject line doesn't, draw them in, and they're just going to overlook it. So that's step number 1. Then step number 2, and the subject line, just as a tip, could be one of your story ideas. So you could literally say in the subject line, pitch, like in those square parentheses, so they know, okay, this isn't a press release, this is a pitch. And then have one of, your best story ideas written in headline format. And then, when you're pitching, first you want to begin on, a personal note. So whether it's something like, I've been, I've followed your podcast for 3 years, or I just discovered your podcast 2 weeks ago, and I've, listened to 5 of your episodes, and I love how you ask everyone this question, but starting with something specific, saying something generic, like I love your podcast, can feel really, not sincere. It's like, it's really not clear if you just copied and pasted it. And the thing is, the secret to getting people interested in you is to show that you're interested in them first. You actually care, about what they're doing. You've taken the time. That's going to make them naturally more interested in them or in you. So that's step number 1. And then step number 2 is then to introduce yourself. And, the key here is to be brief. A lot of times people get really excited. They feel like this is their one shot.
Oh, and, I've seen this because I know I've been on both sides of this, and I know this because for someone, when I did not have a podcast, I had a podcast between 2008 and 2013, like and I did not have a podcast between 2013 and 2018. And between 2013 and 2018, I got approximately 7 zillion requests from people to be on the podcast. And I have seen by the way, amazing that they didn't know that I didn't have one for 5 years. That's a whole different story. But that was one of the most frustrating things, is the war and peace. Come on. you know?
Yeah, it's like they're copying their about page in the email or something.
Their about page and their Wikipedia and their short biography and their long biography.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So that's actually typical. Like that's how to do it wrong. And really what you want to do is just include a couple sentences about who you are. Like 2 sentences is more than enough, like stating who you are and ideally, sharing some of your top credibility markers. So your credibility markers could be the type of media that you've received, any awards you've gotten, any cool results in your business, success stories, clients, number of years in business, training, the list goes on, but just having a couple of credibility markers so people know that you're the real deal. And then from there, you want to share your story ideas. And this is really the heart of your pitch. So I suggest, sharing your story idea in that headline format. And then in some cases, you may also want to include some of the details in parentheses. So if you're saying something like, the 3 biggest mistakes that every entrepreneur makes with their new website, people are going to wonder, well, what is that? And so maybe including like one of those tips, for example, XYZ, just to kind of add some, color to that and some specifics. And then what I like to do is have people share, any relevant media they've done before. So for example, if you're looking to be on a podcast, it is helpful for people to know that you have been on podcasts before. Or if you're looking to write for like Forbes, it's helpful to show a writing sample, whether it's a writing sample from your own website or writing sample from another website, just so they know, like, even though you're pitching them and they can see you can write, they want to see if you can put together an article. And if it's TV, they're going to want to see some kind of clip. It could even be like a Skype split screen interview that you do with a friend, but kind of something to show that you know how to do this. And then, I like to kind of end with keeping the door open, because you may pitch, whether it's 1 idea or 3 ideas or 5 ideas, even if those ideas aren't a perfect fit, you could still be a great fit for something else. So just ending it by saying, thank you so much for considering me. I would love to be on your show and, help your viewers. And, I'm also open to, writing or talking about, anything else related to X, Y, and Z. And so that's where you can list your, expert topics. So like if you're a health coach, maybe you suggested a very specific idea around digestive health, but then you mentioned that your expert topics are, women and weight loss and nutrition and all these different things. Then it's like, if they say no to your idea, they're like, but I could see how this person could fit into some other things I'm doing. So those are like the key things that I would suggest people put in their pitch. So that's step number 4, is to send that pitch with, those components.
Got it. And now, is there any different, and we don't need to get necessarily in the nitty gritty here, but really, I'm a big believer. I'm a big, not only 80-20 rule, I'm a big believer like 90-10, or in many cases 98-2. So 98 or 2% of what you do does 98% of the results. So for most people that are, again, personal brands, influencers, podcasters, bloggers, experts that are course creators, things like that. If you were to kind of sit them down and say, you need to focus, because that's one of the biggest things that they have problems with. We all do, right? Is focus, and where do I go? And they see this pyramid, it might start getting overwhelming to them. For their most bang for buck and effort, would you say to focus on kind of the guest blogging, podcasting realm for most of these people?
Yeah, I definitely think that's the biggest bang for your buck. And actually within the pyramid, there is this thing that I call the triangle, the golden triangle of opportunity. So basically, underneath, okay, so there's, the website, and then you've got guest posts. And then above guest posts on level 3, you've got podcast and video, right? So you've got like 3 different things. And basically everyone is going to be best at one thing. Some people are really going to excel when they're writing their ideas. Other people love doing these podcast interviews. Other people shine on video. So get clear on what you enjoy doing, what's easy for you, what's fun for you, and then focus on that. I mean, I think it's valuable for everyone to do a little bit of all of them, get your ideas out there, put them in a blog post, but, eventually you want to focus. And for some people, they just know, hey, like podcasts get me my ideal clients, and it's so fun and easy for me to have these conversations versus writing an article. If that's you, then you would focus on podcasts.
Good. So play to your strengths. Bottom line there. Okay, perfect. So, and the reason I was kind of asking that is that I was kind of thinking in the back of my head, is there a different way to approach kind of old media versus new media? And I think we talked about that a little earlier on, is that a lot of times what we'll consider new media, meaning podcasting, blogs, and things like that. In my opinion, what I've seen is it's a lot more almost informal and more personal. That's the way that I see it when I see stuff like that. Because what I see, the old media, I'm thinking, like you just said, it could be a revolving door of magazine editors. It could be a bunch of new show producers. You don't know. And it has to be kind of that kind of not press release form. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But I see the new ones. I see it as like, hey, we can connect directly to the person or to the person before the person. To me, informality still being professional, but I think that's one of the key things, I think, when it comes to new media.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of new media, and that definitely is my personal preference. I will say that when my goals change, and let's say I write a book one day, I am going to want to be in mainstream media. I am going to want to be on TV. But for right now, for me and for most of my clients and students, like new media is the most exciting because it's more long form. You have more control over what you're saying. You're able to talk more directly about your different products and services in new media, whereas with the traditional media, it's kind of more controlled and it's shorter form.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. So what's the next step?
Yeah. So step number 5 is prepare so you can over deliver. So it can be nerve wracking when we get our first big media opportunity. But the thing is, there's lots of things that we can do to really ace that opportunity. So let's say, it's podcasts, that you're doing. Like one thing that I would recommend people do is listen to 2 podcast episodes with the person who is going to be interviewing them. And also, look at like, what are the interview questions they consistently ask people? Sometimes they'll even send you the interview questions in advance, and it's really worth practicing them. I know for me, when I did my first several podcast interviews, I would practice my answers with a team member and get their feedback. And even after I was done with the interview, I would like send it to a team member and ask like, what do you think about it? And that actually helped me get so much better. And the thing is, I'm not saying people need to over prepare, but the thing is when you do at least, even a little bit of preparation, then you can show up more relaxed knowing that, you've done what you need to do and you can just be present for the interview.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So come in, have a plan, research it. And I think that also frustrates people too when they feel like you haven't read or you haven't listened to what they're doing. And I feel like that can be such a, when you come in, hey, you're prepared, you listened to the last 2, you read the last few posts, you can come in and have a great idea what that might be. Okay, what's the next step?
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing with like listening to a podcast interview, you don't have to listen to the whole hour. Maybe you're just listening to the beginning of the interview, like the first 20 minutes, and maybe the first like the 10 minutes at the end, that way you could go through a lot of podcast interviews. So that's another, tip that people can consider. Okay. And then the next tips, or not the next tip, but the next step number 6 is going live. And, when you're going live, you also need to be prepared. I remember, doing a podcast interview before from my computer, and it was like, oh my God, everything that could have gone wrong happened where, my computer was running out of battery and I was on video. And, I was doing my interview at a weird time where like the sun was out and then it was starting to set and, I was progressively getting darker. I've had situations where, I'm doing the interview and all of a sudden like my phone rings or someone is delivering something and they're not supposed to. So, you want to kind of turn off your ringer, make sure that you're, if you're doing it from your computer that it's charged up and just, be ready to go live and just be 100% there.
Okay, perfect. And then I think we've reached here, the final step?
Yeah. So step number 7 is to leverage your media coverage. So, a lot of people will say things like, oh, I got featured on this website and nothing happened. Like, does it mean that, media doesn't work for me or what am I doing wrong? And the thing is, you have to make sure you play a part in making sure that the media spreads, right? So you doing the interview is one thing, you spreading it is another thing. So a couple of things that I have done is, I add my very best interviews, guest posts into my email nurture sequence. So when someone is looking to learn about you, they join your list for the first time, they're so excited, they want to know who is this person. And so that's a time to roll out the red carpet and give them your best stuff. And so maybe you have, a piece, and maybe it was even a piece that, you had sent out to your newsletter before, but now you have it on Huffington Post. You can say to them like, I want to share with you one of my most popular articles on the Huffington Post and then include it in your newsletter. But, sharing, that article or including a link to a 30-minute interview so they can get to know you better is a great way to repurpose your media and put your best stuff in front of people who are most excited to receive it. Another great place to, put, another great way to share your media coverage is during your launches. So I remember doing this podcast interview with Andrew Warner from Mixergy and being really nervous.
Good buddy, a good buddy right there.
Yeah, he's awesome. And it was scary for me because I knew that he would ask me, how much money do you make, which he did. And he sometimes will disagree, and get into debates with his guests. And I'm really
well aware. I've been on Andrew's show twice. He's also a good friend of mine. I love getting in the trenches, but that can make people very uncomfortable. I can tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. But I also knew that he was, one of the best interviewers out there. And so I, shared the interview with my audience. And I also, when you share your interviews, you can't just be like, here's my interview. You have to sell it to them, So, sharing the story behind how I connected with Andrew and how I was so nervous for the interview and how I even had my team listen to it and say, like, did I share too much? Is this okay to share with my audience? And then inviting them to check it out. And, with the interview, we talked a lot about my work and how I help people. So it was really perfect for this, lead into the 6-month group program I had. And then, after the webinar I did for that program, the sales webinar, I shared that interview again. I said, as you know, doors are open for my 6-month program. I know it's a big decision to decide whether to invest and spend the next 6 months with me, so I want to, invite you to check out, these 2 podcast interviews so you can feel like you know me better. And some people might think like, well, who's going to listen to, a 30-minute or 1-hour interview during a launch? But the thing is, if someone is thinking like, am I going to spend $3,000, $5,000, dollars with this person? They are going to listen to the interview. And there were people who said to me, between your webinar and the podcast interviews, I just felt like I really got to know you. And I feel really excited to work with you in your 6-month program. And there's also some people that will just never attend a webinar, but they will listen to a podcast interview on the go. So, your interviews, your articles are just another form of your content. And so it's really important to not just, do it and then do nothing with it, but really put it in front of the people who would be most interested in it.
Wow, I love it. That was a fantastic tip because I never really thought about it that way, because I think a lot of us think about, okay, I've been interviewed on something, or I have a guest blog, or I have, whatever that's gone up. I'm going to put it on all my social media sites. And, if it's a really cool, high level thing, I'll get the fancy logo on my own website and use it on landing pages and stuff like that. But I have never thought about that is great content and material for a promotion or a launch to actually share those things. I mean, that is a big one. It's not just a traffic, let's say, getter, if you will. It's also another great form of content that you can share with your audience at the right time as well, instead of just, hey, this just came out today, right?
Yeah. And also, like, when your audience sees that you're everywhere, like, oh, you were on this podcast and you wrote that guest post and this person mailed about you, they're like, oh my gosh, you're everywhere. People have said to me, like, I'm seeing you everywhere right now. And it feels like a sign that I meant to work with you. And for a lot of people, like, they'll see something once, they might be like, oh, that's interesting. But if they don't see it again, they just forget about it. Like, you kind of need to be in front of people multiple times for them to be like, oh my gosh, I got to do something about this. This person looks awesome. I've been thinking about working with him or her. Now, it's time for me to take my next step.
Love it. Now, I want to ask one more question, then I also want to talk about your course that you actually just mentioned a second ago as well. But I've got one last question here, because this has been great stuff, and I can see people's wheels spinning in their heads, thinking of ideas. There were some great, juicy tips throughout this entire interview today. But I want to kind of, last main question here is, for those that do have the head spinning right now, it's like floating off into space and they've got these great ideas, they've got so many different things in their head and they're a bit overwhelmed. What's one tip where they should start right now? Like, they've got all these ideas, they're like, oh my God, my head's going to explode. What's one thing that people could do right now?
Yeah. So I think, one of the things is like to do an inventory and just like think about like how much content have you already created that could be repurposed for media. So, look through your past newsletters. Which ones were most read? Which ones did you get most feedback from? Maybe you have an online course, and you have worksheets, materials, transcripts that could be used, for guest posts, or, there's stories that you would use in interviews. I think that, when it comes to doing media, there's definitely work involved, but the thing is, it's not as much work as you think, because we're already doing the work anyway, but we're just doing it in a different format. I would also think about, are there people on your team that can help you out? I guess that would be my step right now, because a lot of people think like I don't have time for this. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be that complicated. You can just reuse something that you already have.
I love it. So look into that archive and start thinking about, okay, what is something I can use? And by the way, if you don't have something and you're just getting started, I think there's plenty of tips. Go back in this interview and think about what we discussed when we talked about dog training and women in business and stuff. Very different, little different, is thinking about that core content that you can create that's very interviewable, we'll just say in that case. So also, Selena, a lot of people here, some people are going to take this and run with it. Some people are still going to need some hand holding, some help with this. I know that's the way that I do best. I love learning about a topic like this on a podcast or a blog post or something like that. And then I think, okay, what can I do now for someone to help me? That's just the way that I like to think about like how can I now learn how to implement all this and do this? Timing here has been impeccable because we actually happened to randomly have a conversation about this last week. And I said, oh my God, this is perfect. Is that you've got a course called Impacting Millions. And I've got a special link. It's my special delicious link to this course. And by the way, if you decide that you want to enroll, take this class, take this course, Selena is going to either send me toys for both my kids, a pony, or a bag of cash. I'm not sure, but we'll figure that one out. But let's talk about Impacting Millions, and then I'm going to hook people up with the link. And also, by the way, every link for this episode can be found at therisethetop.com/episode 5, the number 5. But we'll get to that. But let's talk about Impacting Millions. What is it?
Yeah. So, I created this course because I feel like as entrepreneurs, one of the most important skills that we can learn is the skill of getting other people excited about our work, right? And so excited that they want to share it with other people, so excited that they open up their platform of 1,000, 10,000, or even 1 million people to you. So even if you're like, oh, maybe one day I'll hire a publicist, the thing is you need to know how to get people pumped and excited and wanting to share your work. And that's what Impacting Millions is all about. It's how to get new media. It's how to get traditional media. It's how to get influencers to open up their platforms to you, because influencers are the new media. With the program, I help people create their own customized publicity strategy based on their business goals, and also figure out how can they make themselves attracted to the media. So when they come across, the media comes across you, they're like, oh my God, I want to feature this person. Their story is so incredible. And then we dive deep into the 4 main types of media, which are guest posts, podcasts, magazines, and TV, how to pitch for these specific opportunities, how to appear, how to get ready for TV, podcasts, and things like that. And then how to leverage those opportunities to build your email list, to get more of your ideal clients, and also to open up doors to new publicity opportunities and visibility opportunities. Because the thing is, as you get more publicity, other things happen. For example, I know multiple people who have written guest posts that have really taken off. And all of a sudden, they'll have agents contact them saying, hey, have you ever thought about turning that guest post into a book? Or, you start, talking about sharing your story again and again on podcast interviews. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this could be the basis for my TED Talk. Or, one of my clients, Farnoosh Tarabi, who now writes for Oprah Magazine, she was doing a lot of TV, and, brands approached her and they said, wow, you're this incredible personal finance expert. We would love to pay you to represent our brand. And she gets 6-figure brand ambassadorship deals, right? So, all of this has this snowball effect in terms of, making you this household name, in your industry, in your niche, and becoming more visible. So, the way that it works, it's a bit different than other programs because it is delivered live. So I do, I have 6 core modules over the course of 90 days. I give people time to implement in between. So there's 90 days of live training where I'm teaching you live. And then I'm also there to answer your questions directly after the training. And then we have tons of, bonus trainings as well, and different experts that we bring in. After we go through the core content, then I bring in my media experts. And these are people who have worked at places like Today Show, Oprah Magazine, Entrepreneur. And you'll have a chance, every single month of the year to basically, apply for a hot seat, to brainstorm story ideas with people in the media, in terms of how you want to present yourself, what would be the most interesting story, and even have them, review your actual pitches. And it's so exciting because there are people who have sent pitches and they haven't gotten accepted. And then they bring them to these Media Mentor webinars and they just see their pitches transformed and they're like, I get it,
I love it. And by the way, a couple things that I really like about this course. And by the way, if you want to check this all out, we've got a special link for you. It's therisethetop.com/ PR. So just the letter P, the letter R, theriseptop.com/PR. Now, what I have to say though, Selena, is that as we do this podcast, this timing just all worked out well. This is a course that you just offer, I believe, once a year, and it's open now. And I'm saying if you watch this, or I'm sorry, listening to this later on, it might not be open. I'll give you a couple other links here coming up. But for those that are listening right now, you are actually listening during the enrollment period here in March 2018. When does enrollment close really quick?
Yeah, it closes on March 29th at 6 p.m.
Okay, so March 29th at 6 p.m. So if you want to get in on this program, it's theriseptop.com/PR. It's going to have everything here. It goes through the 6 training modules, all that kind of stuff. What I also love, and this was something that when I was looking through the program and Lindsay was looking through the program, so Lindsay, our operations manager, who's, my right and left hand, basically. But she went through and she was looking at things, and something that she really liked, and I said, this is great, is that it's not just a private Facebook community. We come to expect private Facebook communities with great courses, right? But you're also going to be, and I'm assuming this is a kind of a group effort as well, but also your team is posting media opportunities in there. Right now, that is worth its weight in gold right there. So if you're thinking, that group I can see now is going to be, hey, I need someone for this, or someone's looking for this, for that. Is that what we're kind of looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, when John Lee Dumas was opening up interview slots in his podcast, I posted it in the group, and, he told me that 300 people applied. He selected 30 people, and this is people all over the world. And out of those 30 people, about half of them were from my Impacting Millions program. So I was like, oh my God, I trained my people well. And, it's not just me posting opportunities in the group. Other people are posting things like, I just got on this podcast and anyone wants an intro to the host, or, I just learned about this other cool guest post opportunity you can apply for. So everyone is helping each other out. It's a really beautiful thing.
I absolutely love it. So again, that link is theriseptop.com/PR. And again, that's only going to be open until what you said, the 29th, right? It's 6 p.m. Is that what we said?
Yeah, at 6 p.m. And I will say that I spent the past, decade and a half, building relationships with people in the media. So, it's not common to be able to have such high level people who have worked at the Today Show or Oprah Magazine, on the phone talking to you and reviewing your pitches. And I know that sometimes people will say things like, oh, I'm imagining it's going to be a big group and I'm not going to have a chance. And yeah, for the first couple of webinars, there are more people applying for those spots. But I will say, as we grow out throughout the year, there's always plenty of open spots. And sometimes, me or my team are reaching out to people being like, hey, what you're doing is so cool. You should totally, take advantage of this opportunity. So there's going to be, lots of opportunities for support throughout the year.
Okay, very cool. So I would highly encourage people to check that out. A little shameless plug there for Selena's program. It is a fantastic one if you want to kind of get your complete hand holding and know exactly what to do, and either go through the course or even have a team member go through the course as well. You can do that to take it to the next level. Now, one more thing, Selena, we mentioned something earlier. It was, and we can create a special link for this. You had something called 100 top media outlets. Is that like a PDF download, or what is that?
Yeah, they can go to impactingmillions.com or you can also give them a link.
We'll do this, theriseptop.com/media outlets. So let's do theriseptop.com/media outlets. So what, they'll just enter their email, get a download. Is that how it's going to work?
Yeah, exactly. They'll get a download of 100 media outlets.
Okay, cool. So definitely grab that. That is something very valuable. In fact, I am going to go personally grab that right now when I wrap this up, and I am looking forward to checking that out. So, Selena, we went over everything here today that we possibly could. We jammed so much in. I want to thank you so much for coming, and we finally crossed our digital paths, and we did it. We'll have to meet in person sometime as well, which will be even better. But I want to thank you so much for coming on here. And if there's anything else you'd like to leave everyone with, but I think we gave them some links where they can check out some cool stuff, or we can go from there.
Yeah. I think that's everything. Thanks for this opportunity. It was so cool to connect with your people.
All right. Thanks, Selena. So once again, my friends, this was Selena Soo here today. We're talking about all things publicity and media here on The Rise to the Top. Again, the show notes, you can find those at theriseptop.com/episode 5. You can subscribe in many, many different ways to the show, by the way, at theriseptop.com/subscribe. We've got new ones even popping up. Now you can subscribe to the show via Facebook Messenger, which is super cool, and iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher and email. And you know what? If we can put our show somewhere where 2 people are going to listen to it, we will have a link there, and you can check that out at therisetop.com/subscribe. You can also go directly to iTunes at therisetop.com/iTunes. So I will see you next time, my friends. This has been David Siteman Garland here on The Rise to the Top. And remember, if you want some fluff, you know what to do. Go pet a bunny.